Well, hey there, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. You are listening to Becoming the CEO of Your Life, and I am your host, Janine Alley. And I am thrilled to be back with you guys today. It was such a good move for me to take 2 weeks off for a lot of reasons that I am going to be talking about and sharing on the show today. So, I'm talking about shedding the skin in order to grow and to create more authentically. And I'm literally in this process right now. I feel like I'm at sort of the tail end of it, which I feel like is one of the reasons why I can do a show, is because I feel like I've moved through most of it, but also because it was so interesting trying to create content for this podcast, because this shedding the skin process for me over the last 2 weeks has felt very murky, very muddy. I'm going to get into the details of more of this on the show today. But I think in the process of creating this specific podcast, of like coming back to the podcast and coming back to my business after literally not opening my computer for most of the break. I mean, I think I coached one of my clients during the whole entire break. But for the most part, I was not on my computer. And so coming back into the podcast, it was like, okay, where am I? I mean, that's just kind of typical of this time of the year, right? I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, I was supposed to teach a yoga class on Saturday morning, and I never forget to teach just because life just kind of clips along at a regular pace. But that week in between Christmas time and New Year's is always like, where am I? I don't know if anybody else feels like that, but I have a hard time landing. So anyway, I forgot to teach this yoga class. The office called me and they're like, hey, are you coming in today? I ended up going in because I'm super close to the studio where I teach, but I was a half an hour late because they didn't call me until 15 minutes after the class would have started. But anyway, all this to say that this is kind of just a kind of whirlwind, settling, odd time of year. I don't know exactly what to call it, but not only was that happening just in my family, but also that's been really happening in my business. And a lot of that has to do with where I'm at energetically and where I'm at just in the creative process of next moves and what's coming down the pipe in the business, which is really exciting and super fun. But in the process of that, it feels often very murky, very muddled. And so I decided I was going to talk about this today because this is where I'm at. And I feel like this is probably where a lot of you are as well, because January 1st, the beginning of the year, it's an amazing time of year. And this happens, if you're listening to the podcast and it's not January 1st, this happens periodically throughout the year as well. But this generally is a time of reflection, a time of introspection, and a time to think about what you want to create for 2004. And in order for us to do that, we need to shed a lot of the things that are not currently serving us. So I love this imagery of shedding the skin, kind of like a snake sheds its skin. I have a background in biology and science, and so I am often very amazed by animals and the things that they do. But oftentimes we get to this space energetically where we have outgrown what is happening in our lives, and we need to evolve in order to continue to progress. And it is a very exciting time. It's also kind of an uncertain time, and it feels a little bit like there's some fish out of waterness happening here. Another animal analogy for you. But I imagine for snakes as well that it's a painful process. I know that they have to rub up against like rocks and bark and things in order to get the shedding of the skin process going. I can't imagine that feels very good. But I also imagine that the new skin underneath feels kind of like a blister would on our skin. If the skin has been rubbed away, there's that new skin that's often very tender and sometimes painful. And I imagine that that's kind of what it's like, at least for a snake. But that's definitely what it feels like sometimes when we are in this process ourselves of shedding something old and creating something new. And I know for myself, I have this desire within me to always be striving to live more authentically in my life and in my business. And this is what I've definitely been doing over the last several months. If you've been paying attention to what I've been creating over the last 8 or 9 months or so, it has drastically shifted. And you may have also noticed that I'm not currently doing an intro to the podcast. And I've been kind of waiting for a lot of the dust to settle in this evolution and for my ideas to kind of solidify. And this takes time. And I've been proud of myself because I haven't been in a rush like I have been in years past, where I felt this kind of antsiness and this angstiness to get to the next thing as quickly as possible. And I haven't been in that space. And that has been an amazing space for me to be in. And it's taken a lot of work for me to get here. So I am very proud of myself. But this shedding of the skin kind of requires this deconstruction or this tearing down of something that we feel like is outdated. That's a part of us that feels old or outdated or irrelevant. It's something that feels like it's no longer serving us, and we want something new to come forth. And oftentimes we don't know exactly what that is. And that's part of this angstiness, is because there is this level of uncertainty. So I've been doing this in my own life in several ways, in my business in a really big way, like I mentioned. At least it feels like that to me. And what's interesting is that I'm seeing a lot of things in my life coming full circle because I have been more reflective. I have been more curious about what's going on. And I'm thinking about bringing back more of the lifestyle things that I used to talk about quite a bit in the beginning of the podcast, which feels really exciting. Even though I've been told by the quote unquote business experts and whoever else that it's not a good idea and then it's not going to work. But this is what genuinely feels exciting and authentic to me right now. And so that is the direction that I'm going to move. And I'm really, really excited about it, actually. And I would love to get some feedback from you on that. In fact, I got an email recently from one of my clients who is a longtime listener of the podcast. And she's like, I wish you talked about that more. And that was actually when I got that email, I'm like, I don't know. But it's funny because in this quiet space, this is something that has bubbled up and has kind of rekindled this fire, and it's really exciting. I'm also doing it in other ways in my life right now. My oldest daughter is leaving the house to serve a mission, and she has been going to college and living at home. And it kind of feels like an upheaval for me because she is the one that kind of keeps track of everybody else. I don't need to do that because she's been around. And so she is a details person. She's very organized, and she makes fun of me because I lose track of things easily, actually. I know it might surprise some of you, but this is why I do what I do, is because I've had to learn certain systems to keep me on track. But she just does that. She kind of has a knack for it, and she is leaving. And so it is going to create not only a physical space with her not in her room, but also kind of a big hole in my heart for a little bit. My life is going to shift in a pretty big way. And so, life ebbs and flows with this. But at the same time, although I am sad that she's going to be leaving, I know that there is going to be so much joy from the experiences that she's going to have and new ways and opportunities for me to grow and to get better at the things that she was kind of maybe taking up the slack on, I guess, a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about what it takes to have this kind of regeneration or this regrowth, particularly if you're not feeling it right now. I know for the last couple of weeks, I was mentioning kind of this muddiness, this murkiness in the way that I was feeling, and kind of worried that I wasn't going to land on something. I'm like, is this ever going to come together? I mean, there was a lot of that uncertainty and just not feeling very clear on next steps. And so if you're feeling that, I want to offer a few things to you today that's going to help you to regain that clarity and regain that sense of peace in your life, even if the way forward isn't crystal clear yet. So the first thing that I want to encourage you to do is to become courageous to be quiet. So have courage in being quiet. So there's a lot of things that come up when we stay present with ourselves in the moment, and we are able to kind of have those moments of introspection and reflection. And this is hard for us to do because, like I said, there is this uncertainty, which is not awesome when you want answers and you want to move forward, to the point where And I was doing this almost in my life to the point where, like, even this podcast, it was due and I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to say. And yet I wasn't really in a hurry to create. I mean, this podcast is going live tomorrow and it is Wednesday afternoon. I never wait until the last minute to get podcasts done. I try not to anyway. I don't want to say never because I'm a human being, but I don't like to do it that way just because I like to have things planned and ready to go and not feeling like I got to get this done, all of that. However, I was fortunately very patient with this process. And I even just kind of trying to get the creative juices flowing for this, I probably started 5 different podcast ideas on the process of landing on this one. And the old me would have been really impatient with this. I would have been really stressed out about it. However, I have learned that there is wisdom in waiting, not to the point of procrastination, but actively trying to make the way clear. And I think sometimes that takes effort. It also takes, like I said, that intentional quiet time. It's easy for us to just work, and stay really busy and fill that void with a lot of busyness that continues to keep us distracted and not really tuning in and engaging and connecting with the message that we want to share or with the thing that we want to do or the ideas that we have or the goals that we want to accomplish or whatever it is. And when we stay disconnected from ourselves because we are not able to stay quiet, then we start to get frustrated because we are not making the progress that we want to. There is a misalignment that we get angsty with. Okay, the next point that I want to make kind of goes along with this, but you need to develop the ability to be vulnerable with yourself. You have to learn how to be honest with yourself. So let me give you an example of this. So I was recently coaching one of my one-on-one clients, and she was going over a conversation that she had with her dad. That was actually a very painful experience for her. And I was going through the steps of the model, and we were being very curious about what was going on. And what happens is oftentimes when I'm asking clients what they think or what they felt or what they did, they subconsciously wish that they had thought or felt or did things differently than they actually did, or actually thought or felt or did, did things, if that makes sense. And it's not what they want to tell me, or what they sometimes tell me is not in alignment with what is real and what is underneath it all, underneath the story. And the only reason why I know that people do this is because I do this. We all do this, right? This is the way that we've been conditioned culturally to do this, is to hide the truth of what's going on and put on kind of a false front, a front that we feel like is more socially acceptable to other people and to also ourselves, without getting crystal clear on the real deal. And I saw this. I started to notice this with my thought downloads. Actually, when I started my own self-coaching practice long ago, I still do this, write everything down on a piece of paper. And sometimes I was hesitant to write down my thoughts because I'm like, do I really think that way? I don't want anyone to ever read this. This is not what I really think, but it's what I thought in the moment. And we need to be brutally honest with ourselves. We need to be vulnerable with ourselves, because if those subconscious thoughts are quietly operating in the background and we're not shining a light on those things, we're going to still end up with results that we don't actually like. So we need to practice being very vulnerable with ourselves. This is hard to do because, like I said, we know what is socially acceptable and what we should or shouldn't be thinking, or how we should or shouldn't be feeling or doing, all of those things. And so the way that we need to do this to be vulnerable with ourselves is we need to remind ourselves to soften our defensive mechanisms with ourselves, because it's so easy for us to put up heart walls. We do it all the time. We do this in a way to protect ourselves, right? This is why we do get defensive, is because we are putting up heart walls. We often do this in relationships with other people, but we even do it with relationships with ourselves. So I want you to just start to become aware of when you're doing that and how to break down those walls so that you can be vulnerable. You can get to the truth of what it is that you're thinking in order to shed the skin to become the new you in 2024. Okay. And that kind of leads me into this next point, is to live from your heart space. We have to learn how to live from our heart space instead of our head space. And oftentimes we're not very good at this. I mean, across the board, we're not very good at this, but particularly for entrepreneurs, we're not very good at this, because creating a business requires so much drive. Anything that you create requires a lot of drive, a lot of get up and go, a lot of productivity. Even if I had a client who loved to do like home renovation kinds of things. She was amazing at doing it. I saw some of her pictures and it just kind of blew my mind. So Brianna, if you're listening, a little shout out to you and all the things that you love to create. But when we're in this space, we are often leading out with our head space, the headspace energy, or the yang energy, instead of leading from the yin space or the heart space. And the yang energy serves us well, right? We're really good at executing. We're very good at being very action oriented. But unfortunately, what happens is our ego is often very dissatisfied because it's functioning from this place of lack. This is why so often what people do is they try to make up these feelings of unworthiness or not enoughness by getting a lot of things done, right? Which of course is not correlated with who you are and your own worth, your own self-worth. And yet we ignore all of that and continue to just kind of plow ahead, or we think things over and over and over again. And we don't settle in to who we are, what we really want. Again, finding that quiet space and learning how to be vulnerable. So when we're leading out with the headspace, we often spin in fear or self-doubt or self-criticism. We lack self-trust, and we feel like our worth is dependent on external things, like I mentioned, success or productivity, all of those things. And it's all about what we should be doing with our lives. Our heart space is actually who we really are. I've mentioned before, just because I think this concept is such a beautiful way of describing this. In yoga, in Sanskrit, the way that we talk about the essence of who we are, or the core of who we are, is called our Purusha. And this is what I'm talking about. You want to be able to connect to yourself. This is where our love and our creative ideas just flow really easily. And I know when I'm in this space, because I'm feeling good, even if things feel muddy or things feel murky, because I'm willing to wait it out. I'm willing to be patient, and I'm waiting for these ideas to start to come together more organically, instead of me trying to force something to come together and trying to force an output from that forced idea, which just creates a mess, right? So we want to be able to get into our guts or get into our heart space. And this is where things feel more effortless and more abundant. And it's so simple and easy. It's almost laughable how complicated we try to make things sometimes, right? So we know we're in this space where we feel good, we feel excited. Like I said, we stop trying to force something. You're not feeling rushed, even through like the murkiness of things. Yeah, I was able to just be with the muddiness, the murkiness of things not, I say, congealing together and making sense. And I wasn't stressed about it. I was still feeling really positive and really good, knowing that at some point it was going to click and I was going to take off, and it was going to be really, really fun. So this is how we can shed the skin and have it almost feel exciting in this evolutionary process. This is how we learn how to put our heart in the driver's seat, is by getting into that space and operating from that intuition and from that Purusha, like I was talking about. So I just want to just touch on this really quickly. I mentioned yin energy. This is the way I see it. A lot of times people will talk about it in different ways. Like I said, leading out from your heart instead of your head. Yin energy is all about surrender. And I think oftentimes our Western culture views this as something that is weak. Again, I was just coaching somebody on this. This is why I want to bring it up here. But the opposite is actually true. Leading out from your heart space is actually your strongest energy. They say that the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. It's kind of the same kind of thing. This feminine energy is actually very, very powerful. And this is where your emotional intelligence resides and your awareness comes from. And this is the reason, I think one of the reasons why we have so many problems is this is something that is kind of, I don't want to say poo-pooed on, but, like looked down upon. Like it's not as good as, that young, driven, masculine, heat-centered energy that just really drives. It is more, like I said, introspective. It is more authentically you. It is where there is so much more compassion and love for yourself. This is where this resides. So open up to this, learn how to develop this, and you'll be able to shed the skin again and again and again, and just let it be a really exciting and incredible experience. It's like almost being an explorer and the opportunity to kind of discover more of who you are. And for me, this is just so much fun and it's so exciting. And this is where I feel like I can create my best stuff, is when I am in this space. It feels really genuine. It feels very connected to myself and as well as you as my listeners. So anyway, I hope that this podcast episode was helpful. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. You can reach out to me on the social platforms that I hang out on: Facebook, Instagram. I'm over there. You can also shoot me an email if you're on my email list, or you can click the links below that are linked in the episode show notes to get in touch with me. And I would love to talk to you about how you can develop more of this energy to become the CEO of your life in 2024. All right, you guys, have a beautiful rest of your week. We will catch you guys soon. Take care. Bye-bye.